Public who would like to ask a question on this. Mary, would you like to just come to the table, please? Mary, I'm going to allow you to ask your 2 questions and you have a point. Okay, Mary, you're going to ask your first 2 questions, please, on this report.
Right, it's actually comments. The 2 questions I sent, you said were going to be addressed. Is that right?
I was going to read your questions out and then I wanted further clarification of what your comments were so I could get them addressed too. But you haven't put that in writing. So I can get your 2 questions answered at the end of, when, you know, like with officers, and I'll get them to do a formal response to you on them.
Yeah, I would like my 2 questions to be read out. Okay,
so the questions that you submitted was I'm seeking clarification on section of this section, page 29, and how we meet our public sector equality duty in 23-24. I'll read it out for you. So it's public service in the broadest possible sense should be LGBTQIA plus inclusive and acceptable. Social inclusion requires dismantling of all structural policies, processes and procedures that exclude sexual orientation and gender identity or expression, and that negates a person's identity. So that is what you want clarification on.
What does dismantle mean?
Okay, so what we can do, so your specific question is what does dismantle mean in that,
and what are you dismantling?
In that textual phrase. Okay, so we'll get an answer to that to you in writing. Your second question was you are seeking clarification of responsibility for compliance to public sector equality duty when services are contracted out. The diversity, equality and inclusion statement of GLL, who run 20 of Manchester's leisure centres, does not include sex, which is protected characteristics. And then the comment that you've provided underneath it says everyone in our community should have access to our services without discrimination or prejudice due to age, disability, gender, gender binary, transgender, gender reassignment, sexual orientation, marital or civic partner status, pregnancy or maternity, race, ethnic or national origin, religion, belief, and social economic status. So you were...
That quote is from the website of GLL, so they do not have the correct protected characteristics on their website.
So you're asking, can that please be highlighted on their websites?
Well, who scrutinises it? How is it that...
Okay, so I will get clarification for you on there. Okay, so can we get clarification in writing and make sure that you've got that? Is that okay, Mary? So that you've got the written responses at a later date.
Thank you. Use of undefined and unclear language, which is not the language of the Equality Act 2010. It can obscure meaning and negatively impact policy development, implementation and monitoring, and it's also likely to mislead service users. So an example is, Manchester City Council is saying women's swimming is open to all women, and they include trans women in that definition of women. And we believe women attending women's swimming sessions would expect, and have the right to expect, that these are single-sex swimming sessions. Self-ID as the opposite sex is not the law in the UK, and only biological women should be allowed to swim
I'm sorry, that's your opinion.
No.
Sorry, I'm going to stop you on that because this is about equality and inclusion, okay? And
right.
Quite frankly, if a person has transitioned and gone and has actually done this, then why should they not be done this? So I've got to say I'm not going to allow that point. Okay.
There are many reasons why women need single-sex swimming sessions. They might be traumatised by sexual abuse. Women are affected by sexual abuse by men, and it's not all men, but safeguarding principles protect women's single-sex spaces. There are also many women who, for cultural, religious reasons of belief, that require single-sex swimming sessions. And the Equality and Human Rights Commission guidance of last year made a clear distinction between biological sex and gender. The next point, which is about data, on page 69 to 70, are active adults increasing and sustaining activity levels, it says across the, and it gives the figure of active participants accessing leisure facilities, 48 have declared themselves as female and 52% male. It is that we can't accurately monitor the protected characteristics if the data that is collected is not accurate according to the protected characteristics, and sex is a protected characteristic.
I also want to know, when a person has fully transitioned, then they should be treated equally. I'm sorry, but I don't agree with your terminology. So, and it's part of our policy as well. So I don't want to get into a debate, but it is part of our policy. Yes.
Good to hear from members of the public who have different views to all of us, but I would just remind the public watching and members of the committee and everybody in this room that in February 2022 the council passed a motion unanimously to affirm that trans rights are human rights and that trans women are women. So I think that's council policy that was passed by all 96 members of the council chamber. So just to remind everyone of that.
Wow. And what we try to be here in Manchester is to be inclusive. If you live, work, play in Manchester, you're Mancunian. And so you should have equal access.
To make sure that we only deal with companies, when we're talking about procurement, that we only deal with companies that share our values, that sign up completely to what we are doing. And
over the last several years, we have led the way in terms of events such as Manchester Pride, the Walk for Women.
My trauma-informed lead hat on. How are we integrating the trauma-informed work into our equalities objectives? As inequality obviously creates trauma, and a lot of inequalities result from trauma as well.
Over 100 million of capital investment into the leisure estates, including supporting thousands of patients with long-term health conditions, ensuring we address and prioritise our most vulnerable residents and support public health preventative agenda.
Around £83,000, making sure that their programmes for women and girls are free at point of access to start off with, and getting those programmes established within those.